Hi, I'm Mike Kearney on the University of the West of England Cybersecurity MSc, and today I'm going to talk you through 3 keystroke injection attacks using a Raspberry Pi Pico in the place of a rubber ducky. The first attack we're going to go through today is a reasonably simple example of a persistent reverse shell on an Ubuntu Linux web server. So in our first scenario, the attacker has a short window of access to a data center hosting Linux web servers. The attacker doesn't know much about the system yet, therefore needs to establish a persistent reverse shell in order to further enumerate the system and prepare the ground for future attacks. So the setup for this attack is fairly simple. We pre-configured our Pi Pico with the Ducky script. We're using Metasploit's multi-handler as a listener in order to receive the incoming reverse shell connection. If this were a real attack, we'd probably be hiding our true IP address behind a series of proxies. So the attacker starts by setting the multi-handler on their attacking machine. They then plug the Pi Pico into the victim's Linux machine, which you can see in the bottom right. This runs the script very rapidly, running a cron tob, and we can quickly see the session will establish in the multi-handler. We can now enter that session in order to interact with the shell. We now have a shell on the target machine, which we can check by typing "Who am I?" and seeing we are user UE, which is a user on the target system. The attacker can then use a shell for follow-on enumeration, privilege escalation, and data exfiltration. So the second attack is an offline credentials dump and crack on a Windows 10 machine. In this scenario, the attacker is conducting an on-running campaign against an air-gapped network. The attacker has managed to bribe some contract cleaners to plug a Pi Pico into an unattended PC. This will then be used to harvest credentials, which can be used to craft further Ducky payloads, which can then be reused against locked PCs to exfiltrate sensitive data. This attack once again uses a pre-configured Ducky script running on the Pi Pico. However, in this attack we'll also be using the Pi Pico's USB mass storage functionality in order to host a compressed version of the Mimikatz executable. This executable will be extracted to the host and run. Once the creds have been collected, they will be stored back on the USB storage device of the Pi Pico and extracted. The attacker will then take the extracted Mimikatz logs, extract the NTLM hashes, and crack them on Hashcat on a Kali machine. This is a 2-phase attack, with the initial phase being extracting the hashes from the Windows machine. So our agent cleaner has found an unattended Windows device and is plugging in the Pi Pico. At this point, the USB mass storage device will mount and the Ducky script will start to execute. The first action will be to disable Windows real-time protection using the GUI functionality. Without this, Windows would have automatically detected the hostile Mimikatz executable and deleted it before we had a chance to run it on the host machine. It will then use PowerShell to extract the compressed Mimikatz from the USB mass storage. With Mimikatz extracted, it will run it as administrator and then log the output to a log file, which will be copied back to the USB mass storage device. With this complete, we can use PowerShell to remove the leftover files, re-enable real-time protection, and then finally safely eject the USB mass storage device from the Windows machine. Once the script is complete, you'll see the LED on the Pi Pico flash, letting the operator know it is safe to remove the device and return it back to the attacker for the subsequent stages. And this brings us on to the second phase of the attack, cracking the hashes we've extracted. So the attacker now has the Pi Pico with the extracted log file and can copy that across to their Kali PC. The attacker confirms that they have extracted the log file, and they've produced a short Python script to pass out the NTLM hashes to a new text folder, which they now run. With the NTLM hashes isolated, we can now turn to the hash cracking tool Hashcat in order to brute force the hashes and find the clear text passwords. For this, we're using the famous rocku.txt word list that comes pre-bundled with Kali Linux. This demonstration is running on an 8-core Apple i9 MacBook. As you can see, within a few seconds, we have found the clear text passwords. On viewing the clear text output, we can see the 2 passwords are Batman Rules and Lewis Lane. And that brings us round to our third and final attack, 2FA credential stealing on an Android device. This attack is a little more complicated than the last 2. The attacker wants to gain access to the CFO's email account in order to exfiltrate data to use for insider trading. The CFO is rather security conscious and has enabled 2FA with a Google Authenticator app and a password on their email accounts. The attacker will pose as a supplier in order to phish the email password from the CFO. The attacker will also follow the CFO into a cafe and insert the Ducky into the CFO's Android phone when they get up to go to the toilet. This will be used to extract the Google Authenticator code, allowing the attacker full access to the CFO's email account. The setup for this attack is a bit more complicated. Initially, the attacker will need to set up a Google shared document which is publicly accessible. This will be used as the bait for the initial password spear phishing attack. The attacker will be running Social Engineering Toolkit on a Kali Linux machine. They will use this to generate a fake Google login page in order to capture the CFO's credentials. The attacker will email the CFO a link to a Google Share drive pertaining to hold critical business data. However, the link will initially direct to the fake Google login page being hosted on the Kali Linux machine through Social Engineering Toolkit. Once the CFO enters their credentials, they'll be redirected to the Google Share drive. If this were a real attack, the Social Engineering Toolkit link would be hosted via proxies or on a bulletproof hosting server. With the password successfully phished, the attacker will then use Rubber Ducky to steal the Google Authenticate 2FA token and exfiltrate it to a Flask web server. The attacker will then have everything they need to access the CFO accounts for the next 30 seconds. This would trigger an automated script that would use the stolen credentials to harvest the CFO's emails. This stage will not be included in this demonstration. So the initial stage of this attack is the first password phishing email. Here we can see the attacker's screen running Social Engineering Toolkit on Kali and the Android screen for the CFO. The CFO has just received a new email and therefore will open the email. The email claims to have important business data and is totally not from a hacker. So the CFO will open the link. As they're expecting a Google shared drive, it makes sense that they get a Google Splash login screen. They will enter their credentials, sign in, and sure enough are granted access to the shared document. However, as we can see, the attacker has harvested the username and password. This brings us on to the second phase of the attack, stealing the 2FA token from the Android device using a Rubber Ducky. By default, many Android devices do not need the password to be re-entered when the screen has only been closed for a few seconds. This gives an opportunity for a keystroke injection attack. In this scenario, the CFO has just put their phone down on the table and walked away. The attacker has used this opportunity to quickly pounce and insert the Rubber Ducky via a USB OTG cable. The attacker has pre-configured a Flask web app ready to receive the incoming credentials via an HTTP GET request. With the Android device left alone, the attacker inserts the Rubber Ducky. At this point, the script begins to execute, initially opening the Authenticator app and grabbing the code to the clipboard. The script then initiates a web request to the attacker's server with the content of the clipboard as the path in the URI. The attacker's web server notes the password and quickly redirects the site back to google.co.uk. The attacker can now remove the device and leave the cafe, knowing their automated script is currently harvesting the content of the CFO's email account. Although this demonstration did not show the full harvesting script, you can see on the screen here the 12875 2FA code that has been extracted from the device. As this is only 5 characters, we know it is missing the leading 0. The web server now has the username, password and 2FA token, so it can easily run a script to pull the rest of the data from the CFO's email account. So in conclusion, we've seen 3 different attacks across 3 different operating systems. This demonstrates the breadth and utility of human interface device or HID injection attacks. This technique can be particularly powerful when used as part of a complex multi-stage attack. I've produced a full report to go along with this video, which contains further technical details, recommended mitigations, and full references.